The Committee on Science, Space, and Technology will come to order. Without objection, the Chair is authorized to declare recesses of the committee at any time. Pursuant to Committee Rule 2E and House Rule 11-2H4, the Chair announces that he may postpone roll call votes. Today we meet to consider H.R. 5905, the Department of Energy, Science, and Innovation Act of 2018, H.R. 5907, the National Innovation Modernization by Laboratory Empowerment Act, and H.R. 5906, the ARPA-E Act of 2018. I'll recognize myself for an opening statement. Today we consider these three energy bills. Together they prioritize basic science research, modernize and increase the productivity of DOE national labs, and enable the development of new technologies for the next generation. The first bill is H.R. 5905, the Department of Energy, Science, and Innovation Act of 2018, sponsored by Energy Subcommittee Chairman Randy Weber and Representative Zoe Lofgren. This legislation authorizes the basic research programs within the DOE Office of Science for fiscal years 2018 and 2019. It includes research in basic energy sciences, advanced scientific computing, high energy physics, biological and environmental research, fusion energy science, and nuclear physics. These basic research programs are the core mission of the department and will lead to scientific discoveries that will maintain U.S. leadership in technology. The bill authorizes basic research programs in solar fuels, electricity storage, bioenergy research, exascale computing, and low-dose radiation. It also authorizes Office of Science funding for upgrades and construction of 7 high-priority user facilities at DOE national labs. These infrastructure and program investments are crucial to ensuring America remains a leader in basic research and innovation. This legislation is the product of over 4 years of bipartisan work by the Science Committee to advance basic research and set clear science priorities for the Department of Energy. It builds on the achievements of the House-passed H.R. 589, the Department of Energy Research and Innovation Act, and incorporates 4 bipartisan Science Committee infrastructure bills that passed the House in February. One example of the central missions authorized in the DOE Science and Innovation Act is the exascale computing program. Developing an exascale system is critical to enabling scientific discovery, strengthening national security, and promoting U.S. industrial competitiveness. Exascale computing will have real-world benefits for American industry and entice the best researchers in the world to conduct groundbreaking science at the DOE labs. In order to strengthen U.S. energy independence, this legislation also provides support for fusion energy sciences. When commercial fusion becomes available, it will revolutionize the energy market and could significantly reduce global carbon emissions. This bill authorizes funds for U.S. contributions to the International Thermonuclear Experimental Reactor, or ITER, project, a critical step to achieving commercial fusion energy. I again thank Representative Weber as well as Representative Lofgren for their longstanding support of basic research and investments in our world-class science facilities at the DOE national labs. The next energy bill is H.R. 5907, the National Innovation Modernization by Laboratory Empowerment Act. This legislation directs the Secretary to provide signature authority to the directors of the national laboratories, allowing lab directors to make decisions on cooperative agreements with industry where the total cost is less than $1 million. This provides the labs with more flexibility and removes red tape that makes it difficult for businesses to partner with the labs. DOE national labs can provide the private sector with access to research infrastructure as they develop new technologies, but a lengthy approval process can smother industry's interest. This bill gives the labs freedom to pursue agreements that will increase U.S. competitiveness and maintain our technology leadership. I want to thank this bill's sponsors, Representative Randy Holtgren and Representative Ed Perlmutter, for their efforts on this initiative. H.R. 5906, the ARPA-E Act of 2018, is our third and last energy bill today. H.R. 5906, sponsored by Science Committee Vice Chairman Frank Lucas and Ranking Member Eddie Bernice Johnson, establishes DOE policy for the Advanced Research Projects Agency Energy Program. This legislation expands the mission of ARPA-E and allows the program to develop transformative science and technology solutions to address energy, environmental, economic, and national security challenges. Notably, this includes allowing ARPA-E to develop technologies to address the management, cleanup, and disposal of nuclear waste. This bill also maximizes the department's resources. It requires ARPA-E to coordinate with other DOE programs and avoid duplication, and assures that ARPA-E grants go to innovative technologies that would not otherwise be funded by the private sector. Together, these three bills prioritize critical research and outline important reforms to DOE programs within Science Committee jurisdiction. And that concludes my opening statement, and the ranking member, the gentlewoman from Texas, Ms. Johnson, is recognized for hers.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for holding today's markup of three important bills that support science and innovation at the Department of Energy. The bills that we are considering today reflect many bipartisan priorities, and I hope each of them will receive strong support from committee members on both sides of the aisle today. The first bill we are considering, the Department of Energy Science and Innovation Act of 2018, provides important statutory direction to one of the most critical agencies that this committee oversees. The Department of Energy's Office of Science funds a wide range of research and development that has far-reaching impacts across DOE, the federal government, academia, and industry. Much of this language is derived from previous bipartisan bicameral agreements that were included in H.R. 589, the House-passed Department of Energy Research and Innovative Act of 2017. As we await Senate action on that legislation, I support moving forward with additional language, including in today's bill, that would authorize upgrades to important Office of Science user facilities, direct DOE to provide sufficient support to maintain our commitments to the ITER International Fusion Project, and provide statutory authority to fund low-dose radiation research, as well as a promising computational materials initiative at our national labs. I'm also happy to see robust funding levels, including in this bipartisan bill, particularly for the Biological and Environmental Research Program, which supports critical research to reduce uncertainties and better understand the impacts of climate change. If signed into law, I want to make it clear that I expect the Department of Energy to appropriately fund and steward all of these activities, including important work in environmental system modeling. However, amidst all of the positive aspects of this bill, I must say that I'm a little disappointed in the process that we used to get to this markup. With a more deliberative and collaborative process, we certainly could have produced a more comprehensive, well-vetted language that better reflects input from national laboratories, academic institutions, and industry on important projects and programs funded by the Office of Science. Such a process would have made a good bill better. The next bill we are considering is the National Innovation Modernization by Laboratory Empowerment Act. This bill would provide our national laboratories with the authority to directly enter into certain research agreements with the private sector, as long as those activities align with the laboratory's strategic plans approved by the Department of Energy. This bill also includes appropriate safeguards to prevent waste, fraud, or abuse. I'm happy to see us moving forward once again with the important policy change. The ARPA-E Act of 2018 is a welcome development from my perspective. I understand some of my majority colleagues have not always been the biggest supporters of ARPA-E, but after years of successes and several independent assessments praising the agency's work, we are finally passing a bill out of this committee reauthorizing this now vital component of our energy innovation pipeline. This bill preserves the mission and form of ARPA-E while enabling it to also consider funding projects or technologies that can address DOE's monumental and long-standing challenge of environmental cleanup at the legacy sites of Manhattan Project. It also includes language from a bipartisan ARPA-E Reauthorization Act that I introduced last year, which would ensure that sensitive business information collected by the agency remains protected. This will enable even greater private sector engagement in its programs. ARPA-E projects have attracted more than $2.6 billion in private sector follow-on funding. 71 projects have formed new companies, and 109 have gone on to partner with other government agencies to further their research. I want to thank you, Mr. Chairman and Congressman Lucas, for embracing ARPA-E innovative model and joining me in supporting its reauthorization. I thank you and yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. And pursuant to notice, I now call up H.R. 5905, the Department of Energy, Science, and Innovation Act of 2018, and the clerk will report the bill.
H.R. 5905, a bill to authorize basic research programs in the Department of Energy Office of Science for fiscal years 2018 and 2019.
Without objection, the bill is considered as read and open for amendment at any point. And I'll recognize the bill's sponsor, the gentleman from Texas, the chairman of the Energy Committee, Mr. Weber.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to speak on behalf of my bill, H.R. 5905, the Department of Energy, Science, and Innovation Act of 2018. This legislation authorizes the Department of Energy's Office of Science programs for fiscal years 2018 and 2019. It also authorizes upgrades and new construction of major user facilities at Department of Energy, national labs, and universities. Over the past 4 years, the Energy Subcommittee has held hearings, met with stakeholders, and worked extensively with our colleagues to draft the language included in today's legislation. We spoke with lab directors, DOE officials, academia, and industry about the right priorities for the Office of Science. The result was a series of bills that the Science Committee has advanced this Congress, including H.R. 589, H.R. 4376, H.R. 4377, and H.R. 4675. The legislation we will consider today combines these bills to form a comprehensive bipartisan authorization of the Department's basic science research. This includes over $6 billion with a B dollars in fundamental research and discovery science largely performed at DOE national laboratories and user facilities around the country. 2 weeks ago, I, along with several of my Science Committee colleagues, had the opportunity to visit a number of these facilities at Argonne National Laboratory and Fermi National Accelerator Laboratory. We got to see firsthand the incredible work that these men and women do not only for our country, but for the world. And I have to agree with Secretary Perry when he testified before this committee earlier this month that these labs are, and I quote, incubators of innovation, and they are among America's greatest treasures. High-energy physics, advanced scientific computing, focusing on basic and fundamental research at our national labs, these all provide the best opportunity for innovation and economic growth. The DOE Science Innovation Act authorizes funding for critical infrastructure projects at these national labs. In the Basic Energy Science Program, it authorizes upgrades to world-leading X-ray light source facilities around the country, like the Advanced Photon Source at Argonne National Laboratory and the LINAC Coherent Light Source at SLAC National Accelerator Laboratory. These facilities give American scientists the tools they need to study the structure and behavior of physical and biological materials, enabling innovation in many fields, including creating new materials for industry and developing new pharmaceuticals. This legislation also authorizes the construction of new DOE research facilities in nuclear physics and high-energy physics. This includes construction of the Facility for Rare Isotope Beams, or FRIB, at Michigan State University, which will enable critical nuclear physics research across a wide breadth of fields, ranging from astrophysics to medicine. It will also include the construction of the Long Baseline Neutrino Facility at Fermilab, which is an internationally coordinated project designed to build the world's highest intensity neutrino beam. The research at this facility will help shed light on the universe and its origins. This bill also specifically authorizes basic research in fields that are critical to U.S. dominance in science and technology. It authorizes research in exascale computing, in electricity storage, and fusion energy sciences. It establishes the DOE Exascale Computing Program, a low-dose radiation research program, and programs for managing our energy frontier research centers and bioenergy research centers, and ensures that we fulfill our commitments to the ITER project for fiscal years 2018 as well as 2019. Significant investments in basic science research by foreign countries like China threaten America's global standing as the leader in scientific knowledge. To maintain our competitive advantage as the world leader in science, we must continue to support this research and the research infrastructure that will lead to the next generation energy technologies. H.R. 5905 is a common sense bill that will maintain American leadership in science. I want to thank Chairman Smith, Representative Lofgren, Vice Chairman Lucas, and many of my Science Committee colleagues for co-sponsoring this important legislation. I'm grateful for the opportunity to work with the members of this committee to guide research that will help America compete around the world. I encourage my colleagues to support this bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Weber. And going to go first to the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Foster, and then to the gentleman from New York, Mr. Tunko.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move to strike the last word.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
And thank you again, Chairman Smith and Ranking Member Johnson, for holding this markup and for allowing me to say a few words. I'm pleased to see that this comprehensive bill authorizing funding for the Department of Energy Office of Science includes two important projects: Argonne's Advanced Photon Source and Fermilab's Long Baseline Neutrino Facility. I especially want to thank my colleague, Mr. Weber, for sponsoring this important legislation and also for leading a delegation of Science Committee members to visit Fermilab and Argonne a few weeks ago. As several of my colleagues on this committee saw firsthand on that congressional delegation trip, the cutting-edge science conducted at Argonne and at the user facilities they support are critical to U.S. industry and academic science. Argonne's Advanced Photon Source, or APS, supports discovery science and market-driven research on materials, chemistry, physics, and biology. The APS is a user facility for thousands of academic, national lab, and industry scientists across the country. The APS has allowed scientists to visualize everything from nanoscale materials to high-speed liquid jets. The APS has also facilitated development of products from solar shingles to drugs to treat HIV. The upgrade authorized in this bill will leverage existing infrastructure to create a world-leading facility at substantially less cost than a new facility. This upgrade will enable the APS to become the ultimate 3D microscope, opening up scientific frontiers at the nanoscale that are completely inaccessible today. Without it, the United States will lose its global leadership in X-ray science. The second critical project that this bill authorizes is the LBNF Dune project, which is critical to maintaining U.S. leadership in high-energy physics and fundamental science. The Long Baseline Neutrino Facility at Fermilab in Batavia, Illinois, will power the deep underground neutrino experiment at the Sanford Underground Research Facility in Leeds, South Dakota. LBNF Dune will bring us greater understanding of neutrinos, the most abundant and mysterious matter particles in the universe. LBNF Dune will also be the first major international megascience project to be hosted by the Department of Energy in the United States. The LBNF Dune international collaboration involves 1,000 scientists and engineers from 30 countries around the world. On the congressional delegation tour of Fermilab earlier this month, several of my colleagues on the Science Committee were able to personally see some of the high-tech, leading-edge work being done in high-energy physics, and to meet many of my old friends from Argonne and Fermilab, where I worked for over 20 years. The work at these national labs is critical to maintaining our U.S. scientific leadership. In fact, earlier this year, I was proud to personally escort Secretary Perry on his visits to both Argonne and Fermilab, and was thrilled to see his genuine enthusiasm for the science that is done there. This bill takes the important step of authorizing the funding for these projects, in addition to providing comprehensive authorization language for the DOE Office of Science. Science requires long-term and sustained funding in order to plan ahead and ensure opportunities are not missed, especially for large-scale, long-term projects such as these. This bill is an
like Lawrence, Berkeley, and Slack near my district, but also excellent facilities across the United States. They are centers of innovation in many subjects, and especially for energy, used by scientists, researchers, students, even the private sector. There's a broad spectrum of topics where we see advances. Now, it's no secret to members of this committee that I've been a longtime supporter and advocate for fusion energy research. Fusion has such a potential to provide abundant, reliable, emission-free, and practically limitless energy that would satisfy our electricity needs for the foreseeable future. It's a huge challenge. We have achieved fusion but not ignition, so this is basically a research project at this point, but the potential benefits are so enormous for our world that it's important that the research be continued, and that's an additional reason why I am so pleased to be the Democratic co-sponsor of this bill. In particular, I'm happy to see that it would establish an inertial fusion energy program that's consistent with the 2013 National Academies report and include inertial and other innovative fusion concepts in the development of a comprehensive strategic plan for fusion. Also, as has been mentioned, sufficient support for both the U.S. commitments to ITER's International Fusion Project as well as the non-ITER portions of the fusion budget. I want to thank Mr. Weber for introducing this bill and just say I'm proud to be the lead Democratic sponsor for this bill, and I thank both Mr. Weber and the chairman for recognizing me. I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Lofgren. And the gentleman from New York, Mr. Tunko, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move to strike the last word.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chair and Ranking Member Johnson, for this bill package that speaks significantly to our future, I believe. Before I offer my comments, I would ask that I could recognize Cheyenne, who is our rep from the foster family program that's shadowing many of us today,
Okay.
and thank Cheyenne for being here. The only way America will meet our greatest energy challenges is with smart, visionary investments in research and development. Our federal government has an exemplary record of partnering with universities and private sector leaders to drive innovation, including critical smartphone technologies and the framework for the Internet. Groundbreaking advances by America's private sector and university communities are propelled and even made possible by a public R&D portfolio that covers the spectrum from basic science to technology development, testing, and deployment. Ongoing support of these smart investments is essential to driving down costs and improving performance of advanced and everyday energy technologies. I am relieved to be working on a bipartisan basis to move this legislation forward to support American science and energy innovation. The Office of Science at DOE supports critical work that is producing major breakthroughs in science and energy innovation and, indeed, in national security. ARPA-E continues to play a critical role in expanding our portfolio of innovation programs and lowering risk on projects that advance the horizon of our discovery, a vital pathfinding tool for our future economy and national security that simply would not be supported by the private sector. Failing to adequately support and fund these critical initiatives will undermine development of our next generation of scientists and engineers and the transformative achievements they will be responsible for. And our nation will further lose its standing as a world leader in energy innovation. We must press forward and innovate. Supporting such innovation must also mean support for adequate funding. I hope that this committee continues to invest in America's future and redouble our bipartisan commitment to this critical innovation. And with that, Mr. Chair, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Tunko. The only amendment to H.R. 5905 on the roster that I'm aware of is a manager's amendment offered by the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Weber, and he's recognized for that purpose.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have an amendment at the desk.
And the clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment to Department of Energy and Science Innovation Act of 2018, offered by Mr. Weber of Texas, amendment number 019.
Without objection, the amendment is considered as read, and the gentleman is recognized to explain his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This amendment provides for technical changes to the legislation. I do appreciate the opportunity to work with minority and to identify these changes prior to today's markup, and for their support of this important legislation authorizing the Department of Energy Office of Science. I encourage my colleagues to support the amendment, and with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Weber, and the ranking member is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to strike the last word.
Gentlewoman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. I support this manager's amendment, which makes some positive changes to the bill. I'd also like to take a moment to thank both Chairman Smith and Subcommittee Chairman Weber and their staff for working with us on this amendment. It's a good amendment to a good bill, and I urge my colleagues to support it. I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. If there's no further discussion on the amendment, the question is on agreeing to the amendment offered by Mr. Weber. All in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it, and the amendment is agreed to. If there are no further amendments or reporting quorum being present, I move that the Committee on Science, Space, and Technology report H.R. 5905 to the House as amended with the recommendation that the bill be approved. The question is on favorably reporting H.R. 5905 to the House as amended. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the bill is ordered reported favorably. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. H.R. 5905 is ordered reported to the House, and I ask unanimous consent that staff be authorized to make any technical and conforming changes. Without objection, so ordered. Pursuant to notice, I now call up H.R. 5907, the National Innovation Modernization by Laboratory Empowerment Act, and the clerk will report the bill.
H.R. 5907, a bill to provide directors of the National Laboratory signature authority for certain agreements and for other purposes.
Without objection, the bill is considered as read and open for amendment at any point, and I'll recognize the bill's sponsor, Mr. Holgren, for his opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman, for this markup today and for all your help on this. I'd also like to thank the distinguished chairman of the Energy Subcommittee for his help on the underlying bill. I'd also like to thank my colleague from Colorado, Mr. Perlmutter, for his help on this bipartisan legislation that would help our national labs better work with all businesses, but especially small businesses, by being more nimble and being able to quickly react to the needs of the private sector working with the labs. In the previous Congress, this House passed legislation I introduced with the gentleman from Colorado, which would do a number of things to modernize the national laboratories, including the provision we have introduced as a standalone today. In the 113th Congress, this House passed similar legislation without any opposition. I've had the opportunity to visit a number of our national laboratories, and the thing they all have in common is the unique expertise they house and the world-leading instruments they maintain. They truly are the crown jewel in our research ecosystem, and this legislation would make it easier to access the labs for the general public. One of the primary issues I have heard about with the public trying to work with our laboratories is the time it takes for many agreements to be worked out, often taking months after laboratory approval before final sign-off from the department. Make no mistake, I believe oversight of our national labs by the department is vital, and the labs must be aligned under the mission of the department. But I do believe there should be some level of trust given to the labs to enter into smaller agreements. With this legislation, signature authority for cooperative research and development agreements, work for other agreements, and other agreements determined appropriate by DOE would be given to the labs so long as they totaled less than $1 million. With the increased reporting requirements for these agreements, I believe this strikes the proper balance for oversight with the departments and the intentions of Congress in creating the government-owned, contractor-operated model of the national labs. I'm grateful for the Secretary at our recent hearing signaling his willingness to work with this idea, and I believe it fits with the administration's priorities in removing red tape where it's not needed and freeing the private sector up to innovate and bring new ideas to market. So again, thank you, Chairman. I want to thank also the gentleman from Colorado and all my colleagues on the committee for their support, and I urge passage of this important legislation. With
Thank
that, I
you,
yield back.
Mr. Holgren. Appreciate that. And the gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Perlmutter, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Holgren. I was surprised, as a gentleman from Illinois, that you didn't talk about any of your labs or the universities of Illinois, but Dr. Foster took care of that. So I think you're good. But I appreciate the gentleman for bringing this bill. Does give the opportunity to the directors of the labs to have authority and some discretion in dealing with contracts and agreements that are $1 million or less. That will allow the labs to enter into these agreements in a much quicker basis, but it doesn't relieve us of oversight, doesn't relieve the labs of auditing trails and appropriate accounting for these kinds of things, but it does allow them to enter into contracts much quicker basis. So I think this is a good bill. It was part of the overall modernization of our Laboratories Act that Mr. Hultgren and I sponsored earlier. This piece, I think, should move very quickly through the process. And as this committee knows, I represent Golden, Colorado, and the National Renewable Energy Lab. NREL is the premier energy efficiency and renewable energy lab in the world. And for more than 40 years, NREL has led the charge in research and design of renewable energy products directly affecting the way we utilize and secure American energy. This bill would allow that director of that laboratory to enter into contracts of $1 million or less without going through a whole bunch of levels of approval. Obviously, over that, then the approval process kicks in, but the auditing process to make sure that there isn't any funny business will always be there. So this gives us an opportunity to be nimble, as the title to the bill would suggest, gives the opportunity to have discretion within our directors, who are all very accomplished individuals, and will allow us to move quickly in a very fast field that is competitive all around the world. So I thank the gentleman from Illinois for bringing this bill and allowing me to co-sponsor with him. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Perlmutter. If there are no amendments, reporting quorum being present, I move the Committee on Science, Space, and Technology report H.R. 5907 to the House with the recommendation that the bill be approved. The question is on favorably reporting H.R. 5907 to the House. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the bill is ordered reported favorably. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table, and H.R. 5907 is ordered reported to the House. Pursuant to notice, I now call up H.R. 5906, the ARPA-E Act of 2018, and the clerk will report the bill.
H.R. 5906, a bill to amend the America Competes Act to establish Department of Energy policy for advanced research projects, agency energy, and for other purposes.
Without objection, the bill is considered as read and open for amendment at any point, and the bill's sponsor, the gentleman from Oklahoma, Mr. Lucas, is recognized for his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to speak on behalf of this important legislation. The ARPA-E Act of 2018 requires the Department of Energy to refocus ARPA-E towards developing transformative science and technology solutions to address energy, environmental, economic, and national security challenges. ARPA-E was created to ensure that the U.S. energy sector maintained a competitive edge in developing energy technologies. The program was established to help develop high-potential, high-impact energy technologies that were too early stage to attract private sector investment. ARPA-E was designed to provide finite R&D funding for a limited time with the intention of having a quick, notable impact on the development of new energy technologies. In order to accomplish this, ARPA-E was given a unique management structure with flexible start and stop research projects that are no longer achieving individual goals, expedited hiring and firing authority to make sure that ARPA-E staff could adequately select and support projects, and the tools to identify market challenges that could affect the advancement in project technologies. However, there are a number of issues that have made ARPA-E controversial over the years. The first is the worry that this is just more of the same from the Department of Energy. After all, the Energy Efficiency and Renewable Program, funded at over $2.3 billion, why did we need another clean energy program? Second, we've heard concerns over the years that ARPA-E wasn't meeting its intended goal to fund the kind of technologies that are so innovative they would never attract private sector investment, but was instead providing funding to big companies with access to market capital or funding research that was already underway in other federal agencies or in the private sector. I believe that while these are valid concerns, ARPA-E is a program that can and has had tremendous impact on the development of new energy technologies. Over the 10 years after its establishment, the bill we will consider today will both address these concerns and enable ARPA-E to apply its innovative approach to a broader set of technology challenges. The reforms in this legislation will expand the mission of ARPA-E to include the full DOE mission and empower the agency to promote science and technology-driven solutions to DOE's broad mission goals. Following the mission of the department, the ARPA-E Act of 2018 will allow the agency to solve big challenges like nuclear waste management and cleanup, reducing the environmental impact of energy production, and improving the reliability, resiliency, and security of the electric grid. The bill also provides the Secretary with flexibility to identify additional challenges for ARPA-E to address within the core mission of the department. The ARPA-E Act also takes important steps to prevent the duplication of research across DOE and to require applicants to indicate that they have attempted to find private sector funding for a particular technology. This good governance provision ensures limited taxpayer dollars are spent on the most innovative and transformative technologies, not in competition with the private sector. With the right mission goals and management, I believe ARPA-E's innovative approach can build on the basic science and early stage research at the department and help fast-track new technologies that will grow our economy. Once again, I'd like to thank Chairman Smith for supporting this legislation, and also like to thank Ranking Member Johnson for co-sponsoring this bipartisan bill. I encourage my colleagues to support the bill, and I yield back the balance of my time, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Lucas. And the gentlewoman from Texas, the ranking member, is recognized for her comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've spoken on this bill in opening statement, so I'll be brief. I just want to thank Mr. Lucas for sponsoring this bill, which I'm co-sponsoring. ARPA-E is widely considered one of the most successful and cost-effective programs at the Department of Energy. I am a big supporter of their work, and as the appropriators process moves forward, I hope that we can work together to ensure that this program is fully funded. I want to again thank Mr. Lucas and Chairman Smith for working with us. I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. The only amendment on the roster is a manager's amendment offered by the gentleman from Oklahoma. Oh, I am sorry. The gentleman from California, Mr. McNerney, is recognized.
Move to strike the last word.
He's for 5 minutes.
I thank the chairman for bringing these bills today. I want to second the comments of my colleague from California, Ms. Lofgren. The national labs are a tremendous asset for our nation. I worked at the Sandia National Lab in Albuquerque for a number of years, and I saw the tremendous resource of innovative talent and innovative drive that my colleagues had at the labs. Livermore National Labs are right outside of my district, and I see the passion of the people that work there, so I appreciate their work, and this committee should continue to support the work that's conducted by our national laboratories. In particular, I support the nuclear fusion programs. Again, like Ms. Lofgren, I see tremendous potential for that technology as it matures. And I also want to say that ARPA-E, the bill under discussion now, has been a real opportunity for energy innovation, which is badly needed. We do have energy challenges in this country. We need to address climate change, and ARPA-E is a tremendous tool for doing that. So I support the bill, and I support the chairman and the ranking member, and my friend from Oklahoma, Mr. Lucas, for bringing this forward. I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. McNerney. And the gentlewoman from Oregon, Ms. Bonamici, is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I want to join my colleagues in offering support for this important bill and thank Mr. Lucas and Ranking Member Johnson for bringing it forward, and also say that I'm pleased that we're doing this bipartisan package of bills today. I also want to ask the Science Committee to welcome my foster intern for the day, Isaiah Paloma. Isaiah spent time, although he lives in Oregon now, he spent time in the Idaho foster youth system, serving on the Idaho Foster Youth Advisory Board. He now lives in Seaside, Oregon, in the district I'm honored to represent, and is part of the Congressional Foster Youth Shadow Program. And I want to say, Mr. Chairman, committee members, I think it's really important that we're doing this package of bipartisan bills today when we have foster youth here from around the country to show them that we are able to work together and willing to invest in something as important as research and innovation into our energy future. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, colleagues. Yes, Isaiah is here today, sitting behind me today. Thank you so much for bringing this package of bills forward. I look forward to supporting them here in the committee and on the floor. And I yield back. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Bonamici. Okay. The only amendment on the roster
Mr. Chairman?
is an amendment by the gentleman from Oklahoma, and he's recognized for purposes of offering that amendment.
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
And the clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment to H.R. 5906, offered by Mr. Lucas of Oklahoma, amendment number 008.
Without objection, the amendment is considered as read, and the gentleman is recognized to explain his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This amendment provides for technical changes to the legislation. I appreciate the opportunity to work with the minority to identify these changes prior to today's markup and for their support on this important legislation. I encourage my colleagues to vote for this amendment, and with that, I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Lucas. Is there any further discussion on the amendment? The gentlewoman from Texas, Ms. Johnson, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move to strike the last.
The gentlewoman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. I want to thank Mr. Lucas for offering the amendment, which I support. The amendment makes minor but helpful changes to the base bill. I urge my colleagues to support the amendment, and I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. This is going very quickly. Is there any further discussion, any further amendments? If not, the question is on agreeing to the amendment offered by Mr. Lucas. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the amendment is agreed to. If there are no further amendments, reporting quorum being present, I move that the Committee on Science, Space, and Technology report H.R. 5906 as amendment to the House with the recommendation that the bill be approved. The question is on favorably reporting H.R. 5906 to the House as amended. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the bill is ordered reported favorably. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. H.R. 5906 is ordered reported to the House, and I ask unanimous consent that staff be authorized to make any necessary technical and conforming changes. And without objection, so ordered. I hope all members will stay in the room just for a minute. I've got 3 announcements I'd like to make, so if you all will stay close by. The first is to welcome our newest member of the Science Committee, and that is Arizona's newest member of the House, Debbie Lesko. Wait a minute. She served in the Arizona House of Representatives for 6 years, and then in the Arizona Senate, where she was President pro tem from 2017 to 2018. Representative Lesko has a keen interest in STEM education and the right kind of climate change. We look forward to having her expertise and perspective on the committee. Welcome, Debbie. Second announcement that particularly the members to my right may be interested in knowing is that of the 32 bills this committee has approved, 28 of the 32 are bipartisan and have been bipartisan bills. That's as good as it gets. Okay. And the last announcement is sort of a mixed announcement. And it is with gratitude for Molly Fromm's skills and with excitement for her next step that I have to announce that our general counsel and the woman either sitting next to me or behind me will leave the Science Committee this Friday, day after tomorrow, after 3.5 years. Molly is a native of La Jolla, California, otherwise known as Far West Texas. Before joining the Science Committee, Molly worked with my California colleague, Representative Darrell Issa, for a decade, first in his personal office and then as Deputy General Counsel and parliamentarian for the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform. Molly has served the Science Committee tirelessly and well during the 114th and 115th Congresses. She understands committee and House procedures, she works hard, and she has helped the committee advance numerous pieces of legislation. Though we are sad to see her go, we're glad she won't be going far. Molly will take over as General Counsel and Parliamentarian for the House Financial Services Committee under my friend and Texas colleague, Chairman Jeb Hensarling. We wish Molly, her husband Adam, and her son Patrick, who just turned 1 this past weekend, a happy future as they embark on a new adventure. So Molly, we will miss you, but we will continue to appreciate all your good work. Do you want to say anything? Well, I'll stop there, except that she has a great, should I say this? Look at her dress closely is all I can tell you. Those are wonderful red elephants. It's my, I used to have a tie that matched it, but I don't know what I've done with it. I would have worn it today. But anyway, Molly, thank you again. Thank all the members for being here. I appreciate everybody's attendance, and we stand adjourned.